Greg's weekly segment is presented by Scott Lawnyard, an official commercial site work partner of the Buffalo Bills. All right, Greg, Tua back in the lineup for the Dolphins last week. And while it wasn't completely all the way buttoned up, missed a couple of throws, couple of botched exchanges, one that went for a safety. There were still all the elements we're used to seeing from this Dolphins passing game last week. It was like Tua just hopped right back on the bicycle.
It's funny you say that. The one thing when I watched that tape, which you didn't really see, and I think actually Jonathan Gannon had a really good feel for their offense, you really didn't see those inbreakers. They took them away. To me, it didn't really look like the Dolphins offense that we've seen so many times with Tua, because that's his game. He's as good a window thrower as there is in the league, and that's what his game is, making those throws. That's what you want to be able to take away. I mean, to me, their offense is about getting the ball in the hands of speed with space and room to run. That's their offense. They have a ton of speed. It's a playmaker offense. Tagovailoa is the executor, the distributor. It's one reason there's so much misdirection in it, because all you need is a defender, particularly at the second level, to take a step in the wrong direction. But I didn't think, Brownie, it really looked like their offense, but you can't count on that this week with another week of practice and, getting back to, I'm sure, what they do really well.
What do defenses tend to do against Miami? What's the first thing they do? It seemed to me like they're really trying to force Tua outside the numbers, taking away like you said, the deep crossers, and certainly trying to keep a lid on Tyreek and the Waddle getting down the field.
Yeah. And I think that's one reason I believe the Bills with Sean have been so successful, is because they're a predominant foundational two high safety structure to begin with. That's the way in which they play. And I think you have to play predominantly with two high safeties, because you do not want to get beat on the outside where you really do not have safety help. Because the bottom line is, if you're going to play single high safety, outside the numbers, he's not really a factor. So I think it starts with playing too high. And then I think the other factor is you take away the first window throws and then allow your four-man D-line pass rush to become a factor. The Bills have been able to do that for the most part against the Dolphins, and I think that's one reason they've been successful. But it starts with taking away those window throws. If you can't take those away and you allow Tua to get into a rhythm where he just hits the back foot and the ball comes out, and he hits Hill and Waddle with room on those inbreakers, then that's where they can turn, a 15-yard pass into a 50-yard play.
Right, but to your point, the Bills have been good at taking that away, and it looked like Mike McDaniel's approach back in week 2 was to flood the ball to the flats and try to get Achane in space and others, but the Bills are also a pretty sure tackling unit.
Yes.
Fought through blocks effectively on screens, and the first man, more often than not, made the tackle. And if he didn't, they were rallying to the football pretty effectively, and yet McDaniel kept going to it almost to the end of the game.
Yeah.
Now, turnovers obviously flipped the script on the Dolphins, but I was surprised how long he stuck with that. Was it because he didn't feel like he could do anything else? I was perplexed by how long he stayed with it.
Well, I'd answer that this way. I think that in Tua, they have a quarterback who's really good at certain things, but that's what he's good at. So I think you're almost, I don't want to say stuck. That makes it sound like a negative, because certainly the guy led the league in passing yards last year, so we're not going to sit here and say he's not a good player. But I think when all's said and done, he's a specific kind of player, and this is what you do with Tua. I mean, you probably saw last week he tried to throw a deep ball to Hill, not the fade that he hit for 30 yards. A fade is not an arm strength throw. But he tried to hit a deep ball to Hill down the left sideline, sort of late in the down where he had to kind of sit on his back foot. He can't make those kinds of throws. He just does not have enough arm. So they have to run a certain kind of offense, and their offense, as I said, is built on getting the ball to their speed guys, and they've got a boatload of speed, including another player, Jalen Wright, who's a rookie this year, who'll start to get more snaps. That's the way in which they have to play, Brownie. I don't think they have a plan B and a plan C I'm just being honest.
Yeah.
Mike McDaniel might disagree with me and tell me I'm wrong, but I'm not sure there's a whole lot more they can do.
How much balance do they have to have, or how much balance would you say they need to, with the running game I'm talking about, to give the Bills enough pause just to drop out of there, get into the windows, and force Tua to pat the ball in the pocket? I mean,
Yeah.
certainly Achane is a capable back. You've got some guys down there. How much do they lean on it, or do you think they should lean on it even more?
Well, I think they go into every game with the idea that we can run the football. Look, this is a team that plays, what, 40% of their snaps out of 21 personnel. They play with the fullback Ingold. And with the Bills will play nickel. They're not going to play base to that. They'll play nickel, as many teams do. You have to treat their 21 personnel as if it's 11 personnel just because of their passing game. So, I think that they go into every game with the idea that they're going to run the ball. The opponent will dictate the kind of runs. We've seen them, Brownie, we've talked about this before. We've seen the Dolphins try to get outside in the run game against the Bills, and they've at times have had success doing that. So I think the run game can be multiple depending on how they see a given opponent. But they do want to run the ball, and there's no question that they can get explosive plays. See, that's the thing that always worries you when you play Miami. We know the Bills have played them very well, and I imagine a lot of fans are thinking, hey, the Bills have beaten them, what, 12 out of 13 or 13 out of 14, whatever that number is. It's extreme, particularly in division games like that. But we know that they have so many players that can take it to the house on any given play. And they can do that both in the run game and they can do that in the pass game. And that's the last thing you want to have happen defensively, because that just changes games. I think we're looking at Achane here, and you just see him. I mean, he's one of those guys that has terrifying speed. There's probably 5 or 6 guys in the league that I would describe that way. They've got 2 of them in Hill and Achane. So you have to be really, really careful.
Yeah. And Achane's got good production against the Bills going all the way back
Yep.
to last year. Looking at Miami's defense, though, Greg, they are a mash unit. You
Yeah.
think about their 3 best pass rushers from last year. None of them are on the active roster now. Jalen Phillips out with a knee injury for the year. Chubb is still not back from reserve PUP. And Andrew Van Ginkel's in Minnesota. They have 9 sacks in 7 games. That's 31st in the league, and they're like 27th in QB knockdowns, 24th in quarterback pressures. It is killing the guys on the back end. They can't cover that long with no pass rush. Kyler Murray was running around, had all the time in the world.
No, I agree. And that's one reason Murray had a really good game, because he actually was able to play from the pocket pretty comfortably, which normally is not the case with Kyler Murray. And they're playing Smith. The last week they played Cam Smith as the third corner. Ramsey predominantly stayed in the slot when they were in nickel. The only time he was outside was when they were in base. He actually got beat by Marvin Harrison when he was outside, and Harrison ran away from him pretty easily.
Yeah.
But last week, the Dolphins played 33 snaps of nickel, no snaps of dime. So, we assume Smith would be the third corner again, with Ramsey staying inside in the slot. But you're right. They've not been able to rush the quarterback. It puts too much pressure on your back end. I don't care how good your back end is. And it's not as if they have 3 all-pros on the back end. Right. So no matter how good your back end is, if you cannot pressure the quarterback, it's going to be hard. And that kind of leads me into something I think it's really worth talking about, guys, that I was really, really happy to see from the Bills last week offensively. And I thought it started on the first play of the game. The first pass play, I can't remember, was the first play of the game. But
it was the first play of the game.
Yeah, to Dawson Knox. No, it was
Knox. 23
Knox.
yards. Is that the actual first play?
Actual first play, yeah.
Yeah. And
offensive first play.
One thing I've talked about with you guys, and I've talked about it elsewhere as well, is just route spacing. I'm such a believer in that from talking to coaches. When you play against zones, and the Seahawks are a big zone team, and I imagine that you'll see a lot of zone from Miami as well. Just unbelievable route spacing into the boundary to present a clean read and throw for Allen. They made it simple. The linebacker Dodson, who you guys know, was the read on what turned out to be a high-low concept, but the spacing was so good that it just made it so clear for Josh. And they did that again later in the game. It was the first third quarter possession when he hit Shakir for 35 yards. Another strong example of route spacing, defining the read and the throw. When you do that, because we all know that Josh, as good as he is a guy that if he doesn't see it clearly, he's going to take off. And ideally, while he's so good at that, that's not the way the pass game is coached, is drop back and take off. So, when you can really present great route spacing against zone, and I think Joe Brady is getting a better and better feel for that, it just makes it easier for your quarterback.
Yeah, and if you put on your offensive coordinator's hat for a minute and look at this Buffalo Bills offense, how do you think the Dolphins match up with the Bills if they go, say, if the Bills go to their 11 personnel with Coleman, with Cooper, Shakir, Cook, and Kincaid?
Yeah, I mean, they got a lot of weapons now because we talked about last week that they have 4 players that are really are location versatile within the formation, can line up anywhere, and that makes it difficult on a defense. Like I said, I think you'll probably see more zone than man from Miami. So, I think again now it comes down to your routes and your spacing and where you want to line people up. Coleman seems to be coming on a little bit. But I think that this is a pass game that, to me, based on what I saw last week, and again, every week is different, but if they can continue to do these kinds of things against zone, it just becomes a much more explosive pass game. It was nice to see Knox be involved a bit. I don't think he's necessarily going to play 30 or 40 snaps, but it was just nice to see because now they've got a lot of options. Now it becomes a case of how they see the opponent they're playing against as to how much they want to play out of 2 tight ends, how much they want to play out of 11 personnel. They even have people that if they want to go 4 wide at times, they can do that. So, you're giving yourself more options with your pass game.
Yeah.
Right.
Are you surprised that Buffalo's offense hasn't fully tapped into throwing to their backs? I mean, Cook will catch a couple of balls a game here and there, and obviously he had a great call, Joe Brady did, back in the Week 2 game to Cook that was the perfect call for a blitz that led to his receiving touchdown for 17 yards. But they haven't even tapped into that part of their game yet. I mean, they have guys that can catch the football in the backfield, and to me, I think it's a page of the playbook they can still turn to at some point in the season if they like the matchups.
Yeah, where they tend to use the backs the most is in the red zone. And it's funny, you saw this play. I'm actually breaking it down on the matchup show because I loved what they did. Because first they put Cook as a shift to see if it was man coverage. They saw that. Then they put Samuel in motion to confirm a second confirmation of man coverage, and they got absolutely the matchup they wanted. Even without the blitz, that would have been a touchdown because I think it was Long was the linebacker, and he had to work through traffic of Shakir and Hollins on that play. That was just a beautifully designed play, and I believe that was 4th and 3. But they used the backs in the red zone more than in the field, Brownie, and that's where they have been a factor. But there's only so many balls to go around.
Right.
And, that's the thing. I mean, we've seen them use Cook over the last couple of years in the pass game, but we'll see. Look, it's now that Coleman is becoming a little more of a factor. They traded for Cooper. There's a lot of guys who can be factors. So what I think it's going to be is probably week to week based on game plan versus a specific opponent.
Yeah.
What do you think of the way that Coleman played this last game?
I think he's getting a little more comfortable, and I think probably Josh seems to be, want to throw the ball to him. I think that, I love the 21-yarder on 3rd and 5 on the third quarter touchdown drive where I guess he was number 2 to trips, and Allen read the rotation and drilled the seam to Coleman. And if I'm not mistaken, because I saw that live on TV, you saw Josh smile after that because I think he saw the whole thing and he knew exactly what he had and he knew that ball was going there. But I think he's getting better. The whole thing with him is he's a big-bodied kid. You want to be able to use him, obviously, in the red zone, which they're starting to. Not every fade or quick throw in the red zone is going to be a touchdown. That's not the way it works, but you're starting to see that. He caught one this week. They came back to him after he didn't get it, and they came right back to him. So, I think you'll start to see him be a little more of a factor. I'm not sure, given all their weapons, that one guy is going to be the target, like on some teams where they have a clear number one and that guy gets 15 targets every week. My sense is, you guys tell me if you think I'm wrong, I don't think their pass game is going to be like that. I think it's going to be spread out more.
Right.
Fourth down, Greg, you could argue the Bills are the best team in football on both sides of the ball. They're perfect, 8 for 8 on offense, and they have 12 turnover on downs on 18 opportunities, 66%. Nobody's even close on the defensive side of the ball to what Buffalo's done in terms of getting fourth down stops. In a year where Buffalo's third down conversion rate is down from what it has been, how instrumental have those conversions on fourth down been, do you think, based just from a bird's eye view, so to speak, of their offense?
I think that's, obviously relatively easy answer, because if you're going to turn the other team over on downs, not only is that just good in terms of you getting the ball, but I think there's an emotional momentum element to that as well. So yes, but it's funny you mentioned the third down, and we talked about this last week, that the last 2, 3, 4 years they were among the best in the league on third down. They may even have been over 50% a couple of those years. But it was nice to see the fact that this past week they were 8 for 15, controlling the ball for more than 38 minutes. They gained 440 plus yards of offense. The one thing where they have been really good this year, and you can never, ever, understate this, is they've been really good in the red zone, Brownie.
Right.
And, that when your red zone TD efficiency is pretty high, and I think it's definitely, I think, third or fourth in the league right now. That is a big, big deal. And the other thing, quite frankly, and people, you never know, it could change. But with Josh throwing one interception, which technically wasn't even his fault because Cooper kind of slipped, that was not going to be an interception if Cooper didn't slip on the slant. When you're not turning the ball over, even if you're not necessarily producing long drives, you're still punting the ball away and changing the field position. So that is a big, big factor.
Yeah, and the Bills' defense in the red zone has the lowest total score percentage allowed in the league. Touchdowns and field goals, just 71%.
That's not talked about a lot, as you know, but those are huge factors in winning and losing in games.
What is it about the Bills' red zone offense that makes them better? Is it the threat of Josh running? Because there's other quarterbacks that can run as well. I mean, Lamar, you got Pat Mahomes who can, you got other guys that can move good. Certainly, maybe no team has a threat of called quarterback runs like Buffalo and Baltimore and those kind of teams. But Buffalo has been historically, with Josh at quarterback, they've been historically pretty good in the red zone, and this year even better. What do you notice about it? Why?
I would say it's two things, and I don't think this is profound, Steve. I think it's really well schemed. Number one, when they do pass, we mentioned that touchdown against Miami week 2, which was a beautifully schemed play. We've seen them do some really well schemed stuff, even with Johnson, the back. Plus, they've been running the ball really well in the red zone. And, I'm not going to sit here and say, gee, they remind me of the Cowboys and Emmitt Smith in the red zone in the 90s. But when you can run the ball in the red zone, particularly in the low red zone, when you're inside the 10, boy, does that add to your offense. And they've been able to do that. And then, and you mentioned it, Steve, and you can't overlook this because it's so critical, is the Allen factor. I mean, not only running in the red zone, which he's phenomenal at, but his ability to move and make plays. I mean, I forget who was against when he moved to his right and threw the touchdown to Kincaid. I think that might have been a Monday night game, if memory serves me correctly. His ability to do that is really, really high level. And that's, here you're looking at one from last week with Kincaid. It was beautiful. Kincaid adjusted his route. He was moving to the outside. He stopped, came back inside when he saw Josh. And they're really, really good at this. Kincaid has actually shown a real affinity for understanding Josh's movement and moving with him. So the Allen factor is a big, big deal in the red zone.
And then despite all of that, Greg, and I don't know if you have numbers to verify this because we've talked a lot about how Josh over the years still will have a tendency to leave the pocket too early.
Oh, for sure.
The view here, though, this year is he's playing, to what degree, I don't know, but he's playing more within the structure of the offense this year, it would appear. I don't feel like he's leaving the pocket prematurely as often as he has the last 2 years. I think he's trusting the scheme a little bit more to provide the answers. And I don't know if you feel the same way watching these games, but it just feels like he's not leaving the pocket prematurely as often as in the past. He's still doing it, but not as often.
He'll always do it to some degree. It's just built into his DNA. But I think again, without having numbers, I would say it feels like you're right, Brownie. And I think part of that is what we started with, talking about the spacing in the pass game. Because if you can keep doing that, particularly against zone, that's where it's obviously a bigger factor. It's still important against man, because you certainly don't want receivers close to one another. But if you can really do that, it really presents a much clearer picture for the quarterback. And that is so critical, because the last thing you want, in an ideal world, you want your quarterback, as he takes the snap, confirming what he sees, not having to start to figure out what he sees. So that's, it's about validation on your drop, not about starting from scratch. And if quarterbacks like Josh, and there's even Mahomes is like this too, if they really feel comfortable on their drop, that's when they stay and deliver the football. And I thought it was really noticeable this week in a couple of the plays I mentioned, and there were others as well. And if they can keep doing that, and that's on your coordinator, if they can keep doing that, then I think you'll see Josh Allen play from the pocket, probably at a higher percentage than we've seen in the past.
All right, it's given your fact that you watch so much film and you kind of have a handle on who's, particularly now, 7 or 8 weeks into the season, you've got a handle on these teams. When you watch on Monday or Tuesday after the Bills play the Miami Dolphins here in Buffalo, and you watch the film, what are you going to be curious about seeing how these two teams mesh offensively and defense? I'd ask you for keys to the game, but I know you're more curious than you are predictive. You know what I mean?
I'm going to keep looking for what I just spoke about with the Bills' pass game, and I'm really going to be looking at how they played defensively against the Dolphins' pass game, which I expect to be better, because Tua just came back last week. So now with another week of practice, I would expect them to be better, at what they want to get done. So I'm really curious to see how the Bills will play, because you guys know that even when you've had great success against a team, you don't do the same thing over and over again against a division opponent. Now, you may get to similar concepts, but you don't get to them the same way, because, it's a division game. They know each other. And coaches coach against coaches. So Mike McDaniel knows Sean McDermott. Sean McDermott knows Mike McDaniel. So they know each other and they know their concepts. So they're not going to just line up and do the same things. So they still are going to have core things that they have to do, because that's what they've been practicing since OTAs, but it's how you get to those things that always fascinates me, because I love the process. I'm a process guy, as you guys know.
All right, Greg. Thanks always.
Greg.
Appreciate it. We'll catch up with you next week.
All right, guys. Thanks so much.